We are in print. Our base case is 650,000, but that base case was set before the SEC approved the Bitcoin ETFs. And so we are more convinced now that our bull case of 1.5 million by 2030 is the more likely case. The third way to think of Bitcoin, so we've got technology, global monetary system, and a new asset class, which is why we are really excited.
Bitcoin recently saw a brief surge past $62,000 after opening at $61,000 on August 23rd, following Fed Chair Jerome Powell's announcement that the time has come to lower interest rates. There is now more interest in Bitcoin as a hedge against inflation and market volatility as a result of this unanticipated change. Although these advances offer a promising future, market volatility and certain regulatory obstacles may make the route to new highs for Bitcoin unpredictable, so investors must maintain a cautious optimism. Cathie Wood recently offered her positive prediction on Bitcoin, estimating a base case of $650,000 and a bull case of $1.5 million by 2030. Her outlook is consistent with her cautious optimism. She underlined Bitcoin's enormous growth potential and critical importance in emerging nations, despite its brief swings. Her observations provide an insightful viewpoint on Bitcoin's future, inspiring investors to see past the present moment and concentrate on the asset's enormous potential. Let's hear Cathie Wood's prophetic predictions and go further into her conversation.
Why do you think that older people are less receptive to Bitcoin, like Warren Buffett or Charlie Munger, so against it? And it seems like young people love it.
Yeah.
Anyone over the age of 50, for the most part, either they don't know about it or they're very skeptical. Why do you think that is?
I think partly it's technology, that there's discomfort. You know, Warren Buffett famously has said, if I don't understand it and I don't understand most technology, I'm not going to invest in it. Now, he did invest in IBM, kind of at the wrong time. So that proved, to reinforce what he was saying. However, he didn't give up. He did invest in Apple, and that's been, a grand slam for him. So, but very little interest in technology, and a lot of people pay attention to him, especially more value-oriented investors, where, in technology, you've got, very often, you have to invest aggressively. A company has to invest aggressively in the short term, forgo short-term profitability in order to be able to scale longer term in this new technology. Value stocks tend to be, what you see is what you get immediately. So there's a little bit more faith in the future, I would say, when it comes to tech investing. And, I'm certainly over 50 and, I'm all about technology. So a bit of maybe an exception there. But I do think there's just a general discomfort, especially because they lived through the tech and telecom bubble and bust. And they weren't looking at it with the perspective I just shared with you, which is, okay, these seeds were planted back then. They weren't ready. And so if you weren't doing the kind of research we're doing in terms of trying to figure out when technologies are ready for prime time, then they were going to get hurt. And a lot of people did get hurt back then. And so that's a memory. Losing money is painful. It's, I know there are studies, you probably know the studies, where it's much more painful to lose money than it is enjoyable to make money.
I think the risk reward on that was the gain of $1 was equivalent to like the loss of $2. So the loss feels twice as worse as like gaining $1.
Yes. The third way to think of Bitcoin. So we've got technology, global monetary system, and a new asset class, which is why we are really excited. And the ARC21 shares Bitcoin ETF is a good example. We have enjoyed tremendous inflows. And I'd like to think it is because we wrote our first piece on Bitcoin in 2014. We've earned our stripes. We had our first white paper with Art Laffer, Could Bitcoin Serve the Three Roles of Money? That was 2015. And then we wrote our second white paper, Bitcoin, Ringing the Bell for a New Asset Class. That was 2016. And finally, the SEC approved earlier this year a Bitcoin or many Bitcoin ETFs. So we think institutions have not moved very aggressively thus far into Bitcoin. Why? It's because they need to do their due diligence. They need to, we've spent 10 years doing this, so we're very comfortable. If you look at BlackRock, for example, until I'm going to say 3 years ago, BlackRock was pointing to the negatives associated with Bitcoin. And then, of course, there was the conversion. And fantastic. I think BlackRock has done a lot for this movement of Bitcoin into a new asset class, but we've barely begun on that.
According to Cathie Wood, the possibility of a bullish situation for Bitcoin has considerably increased with the SEC's approval of Bitcoin ETFs. According to her, Bitcoin has achieved a singularity, a point at which it can no longer be restrained or stopped. Because of its extensive application in developing nations, it is regarded as an essential defense against economic instability. Although corrections for Bitcoin can still be rather severe, they are become less severe as the asset gains maturity. As Bitcoin continues to gain traction, its volatility is expected to decrease. Wood also touched on the potential risks posed by quantum computing, emphasizing that acknowledging the issue is a critical first step. She expressed confidence that researchers are working on solutions to protect against quantum threats. Despite short-term volatility, Wood remains optimistic about Bitcoin's future, especially in emerging markets, and advises investors to maintain a long-term perspective. Now, let's dive back into the interview and hear more insights from Cathie Wood.
What price targets do you have for Bitcoin? Everyone loves this.
Yes. So we are in print. Our base case is 650,000, but that base case was set before the SEC approved the Bitcoin ETFs. And so we are more convinced now that our bull case of 1.5 million by 2030 is the more likely case.
Do you think Bitcoin is currently a singularity, or do you think it will be that in the future, and when will that be?
So when you say singularity as it relates to Bitcoin, what do you mean? Like
you can't contain it at a certain point.
Oh, I think we've passed escape velocity. There's no way to shut Bitcoin down. And China tried. And all the activity that was in China just migrated. There's no oversight. There's no throat to choke. And it has proliferated to such an extent and is serving a really important role, especially in emerging markets, where people, of various countries, if their leaders either don't understand economics or there's corruption and they lose purchasing power and wealth, to the tune of 50% in a very short period of time. Even this year, Egypt, I think it was the beginning of March, devalued the Egyptian pound by 40%. And so having an insurance policy like Bitcoin is really important in emerging markets.
So the bear case for Bitcoin isn't even that it could just go nowhere, but that it will 20x in 5 years.
I mean, you've seen the corrections are violent because it is so early and so young. The corrections used to be 95%. Now they're more like 75%. That's a lot. So I don't want anyone to think that it's straight up and to the right because the corrections are pretty violent. They're getting less so. And I think as Bitcoin moves more into mainstream investing, the volatility will go down dramatically. So it's not like we're saying it won't go down. It will. It's a new asset class. And there are a lot of, I would say, weak holders. They get in because of FOMO, so fear of missing out, and then they lose 20%, and then they get out. They cut their losses. So that exacerbates moves down. So there is one thing that the Bitcoin community is watching, and that is quantum computing. But as I always say, when it comes to risks, half of the solution is understanding the problem. And so now developers are thinking in terms of quantum proofing. So I think that is something we should consider seriously. And I am happy that the developers are considering it seriously because, again, half the solution.
Do you think there are any other drawbacks to Bitcoin?
Well, many people would call drawbacks like higher cost than other solutions, slower transaction settlement times. But to us, those are features, not flaws, because it's part of why it is the safest ecosystem in the crypto asset world.
Following the SEC's approval of Bitcoin ETFs, Cathie Wood noted in her remarks a substantial change in her predictions for the cryptocurrency. Wood had previously estimated that the base case for Bitcoin would be $650,000, but in light of this new regulatory milestone, she now believes that her bull case of $1.5 million by 2030 is more likely to come true. Wood describes Bitcoin as having reached a singularity, meaning it has become so entrenched and widespread that it can't be contained or shut down. She points out that despite attempts to restrict Bitcoin, such as China's crackdown, the cryptocurrency has only become more resilient and vital, especially in emerging markets where it serves as a safeguard against economic instability. Wood admits that fluctuations and corrections in the price of Bitcoin are inevitable and have been less severe with time. While there is always a chance for short-term declines, she points out that the long-term picture is still favorable and that volatility in Bitcoin should decline as it gets more widely used. She also talked about the possible dangers of quantum computing, highlighting the importance of being aware of these hazards. The good news is that efforts to safeguard Bitcoin from quantum threats are already underway among developers. For more insights from Cathie Wood, including her thoughts on Bitcoin's future and the impact of technological developments, make sure to check out the full interview and description. Until next time, don't forget to like, subscribe for daily videos like this. Happy investing!